The last day of a happy family. Emma Carter's day began, as most did, with the soft gray glow of dawn filtering through the bedroom curtains.
Oh, that tickles.
Nestled in a quiet suburb just outside Seattle, her world seemed, at first blush, idyllic. The house she shared with her husband, David, and their 5-year-old daughter, Lily, was the kind that neighbors admired.
How could you do this?
A white 2-story with a porch swing and freshly trimmed roses lining the path to the door. The sound of Lily's giggles traveled down the hall as Emma finished braiding her daughter's chestnut hair. One last squeeze, a sprinkle of cinnamon on Lily's morning oatmeal, and the day was in motion. David, impeccably dressed in his usual crisp shirt and tie, flashed a quick, distracted smile while scrolling through his phone, already caught up in the demands of his high-powered legal career. On the surface, their family life seemed picture-perfect. Sunday afternoons at the park, cozy movie nights on stormy Seattle evenings, family dinners filled with laughter. Yet underneath, tension quietly simmered. Emma had learned to navigate the subtle power plays of her mother-in-law, Gloria, whose firm hand and sharp tongue often undermined Emma's decisions, about everything from Lily's school to the color of napkins for Thanksgiving. David, when pressed, always seemed to side with his mother, never outright, but in ways that chipped at Emma's confidence. Tiny fractures that grew deeper with each passing year. Emma's own family lived hours away in Oregon, and her circle in Seattle was small, so she tried, with sometimes painful determination, to hold everything together. Still, the carefully arranged pieces of her life were already beginning to slide out of place. That evening, the fissures became cracks. David came home later than usual. His eyes carried a coldness Emma hadn't seen before. Without warning, Gloria appeared, her entrance unannounced but not unprecedented. The air thickened with unspoken judgment. David confronted Emma with a calm, rehearsed accusation, claiming she'd been unfaithful. He presented a sequence of photographs, blurred, ambiguous, but damning in the eyes of his family. Emma reeled in shock, desperately trying to explain, but her protests were drowned by David's steady, emotionless logic and Gloria's biting attacks. Lily, confused and frightened, clung to a corner, her big blue eyes wide with tears. Within hours, Emma was handed legal papers she barely had time to read. David, using his legal acumen and family connections, had arranged everything. The house was no longer her home.
Goodbye.
Custody of Lily was granted entirely to David, at least temporarily, for the child's best interest. Emma was given less than a day to pack her things and leave. The evening faded into night. Emma wandered through empty rooms, memories dissolving into shadows. Lily's laughter in the hallway, David's head bent over morning coffee, the warmth of Christmas lights glowing in the bay window. Gloria hovered like a sentinel, making sure Emma took only what was rightfully hers. By midnight, Emma found herself standing alone at the curb, suitcase in hand, the world suddenly too large and too silent. What had once been a safe haven was gone, replaced by a rising sense of disbelief and dread. As she drove away, heart shattered, a single thought gripped her. She had not only lost her home, she had lost her daughter. Yet, somewhere beneath the devastation, a quiet ember of determination began to stir, sinking into despair. For Emma Carter, the days that followed losing her home and her daughter blurred into one endless gray. She checked into a small, impersonal apartment complex on the edge of the city, 4 flights up with a flickering hallway light and windows that looked down onto the backs of strip malls and freeways. The rooms were quiet, but not in any way that comforted. The walls echoed with Lily's absence. Her daughter's laughter had once filled every corner of their old life. Here, only the distant hum of traffic and the click of her own anxious footsteps answered back. Emma's mind spun in circles. Every sign of normalcy in her former life was gone. Her mug in the kitchen, her garden out front, the small routines she'd built for herself and for Lily. But what hurt her most was the severed tether to her daughter. Her court order allowed only the briefest, most supervised visits, if any at all. Every message she sent asking after Lily was screened, rerouted, or ignored by David's legal team, operating with clinical efficiency. She woke up every morning with her phone clenched in her hand, hoping for news. A picture, a text, a word. The few updates she did receive came through bland emails from David's family lawyer, never from Lily herself. There were rules and restrictions that Emma couldn't challenge. Even holidays and birthdays were rationed, reduced to half-hour meetings in cold, unfamiliar offices, always under someone's watchful gaze. Emma fought through every obstacle just to hear Lily's small voice, but the system seemed rigged against her at every turn. Isolation pressed in from all sides. Emma's relatives in Oregon called often, their voices warm but far away. They tried to help, but the distance felt insurmountable. Her life in Seattle, meanwhile, had become a shrunken map. Workplace addresses, the courthouse, this empty apartment. When she went outside, she walked with her head down, feeling invisible, ashamed. Whispers seemed to follow her wherever she went. Some neighbors glanced away, others stared. Everyone, it seemed, had read something or heard some rumor about the scandal that had shattered her family. The grief was physical. Emma stopped eating well, sleep came only in fitful bursts, and she wept into her pillow at night, muffling her pain so the neighbors wouldn't know how broken she really was. She built routines just to survive. Morning, showers that washed away old tears, long walks in the rain to dull the ache, breathing exercises she found online. Sometimes she sat for hours, just staring at the last photo she'd taken of Lily, memorizing every curve of her daughter's face. But in the darkest stretch of that first lonely winter, a lifeline appeared. Sarah Mitchell, Emma's closest friend from college, a petite whirlwind of energy with sharp wit and a soft, stubborn heart, showed up at her door one gray afternoon, armed with takeout, chamomile tea, and a fierce hug that threatened to break Emma's ribs. Sarah didn't ask what had happened, not at first. She just sat beside Emma on the worn couch, swapping stories about old professors and mutual crushes, refusing to treat Emma like she was broken. Sarah became Emma's anchor in the storm. She helped Emma find a therapist and encouraged her to journal her feelings. She reminded Emma to eat, to sleep, to put one foot in front of the other. Sometimes, when Emma fell apart, Sarah let her scream and rage and cry, never judging, simply holding her through the worst of the waves. Still, the pain lingered. Emma lived for those stolen moments with Lily, brief encounters laden with confusion and longing. Sometimes Lily seemed withdrawn. Other times, she clung to her mother with a desperation that broke Emma's heart anew when it came time to say goodbye. Emma wrote Lily letters she could not send and collected small gifts in hopes of brighter days. A pink scarf, a favorite book, stickers that reminded her of happier afternoons. Winter in Seattle was relentless. Blank skies and dripping streets, mirroring her own numbness. Yet, beneath the grief and fatigue, a stubborn thread of resolve began to form. Emma found herself rereading Sarah's words, scribbled on a sticky note. "You have survived every day so far. Don't stop now." There was no going back, but there had to be a way forward. Emma did not know, in those raw, sleepless nights, what the future might hold, or how she could possibly reclaim what she'd lost. But she clung to hope, however fragile it was. For Lily's sake, and for her own, she forced herself to believe that despair could not last forever. Somehow, she promised herself, she would find a way to fight back. Rising from the ashes, the first green shoots of something like hope came slowly, so quietly, that Emma Carter scarcely noticed their arrival. In the harsh aftermath of loss, with winter giving way to a cautious spring, the routine Sarah had helped her build began to stick. Instead of endless hours curled up on the apartment couch, Emma forced herself to get outside, even when the wind cut through her thin coat. She made it a point to walk along the rainy sidewalks, sometimes circling the same block 3 times, just for the rhythm of her footsteps and the promise of movement. Therapy sessions, awkward at first, soon became private sanctuaries. With the help of a quietly compassionate therapist named Dr. Levine, Emma poured out her fears, her guilt, her bone-deep exhaustion. She confronted memories she had shoved down for so long: David's dismissive words, Gloria's cutting remarks, the feeling of being a visitor in her own home.
Emma.
It was as if each tear, each trembling confession, laid a new foundation for the person she had once been and could become again. Sarah continued to remind her, sometimes gently, sometimes with sharp humor, "You're still standing, Em. That's the start of a comeback." With Sarah's encouragement, Emma made a list of small goals. Some were simple: eating breakfast before noon, calling her parents in Oregon once a week, making her bed every morning. Others stretched her comfort zone, signing up for online business courses, updating her resume, sending out job applications even as doubt gnawed at her confidence. The search was grueling. Despite her college degree and years of running her own household, Emma faced a string of rejections. Employers scrutinized the gap in her work history or looked askance at her current address. She stood in line at temp agencies, fingers trembling in her pockets, answering questions about her availability, her references, her reliable transportation.
I'm at the gas station.
Entry-level
Too risky.
jobs in retail and food service came and went. Few offered the stability or income she needed. Sometimes, after a discouraging interview, she would sit in her car and let the tears come, counting each setback as another hurdle to clear. Yet each disappointment strengthened her resolve. "You don't need their pity," Sarah would say. "You only need one, yes." Emma swallowed her pride and networked where she could, at community events, through support groups, even at her therapist's recommendation. At a local women's business seminar, she shared her story, hesitantly at first,
Yes, this is Gloria.
but found herself surrounded by women who nodded in understanding, who offered tips and contact cards, and, most valuably, encouragement. Though she was different from them in circumstance, she saw in their eyes the same resilience she hoped to rediscover in herself. When a recruiter from a mid-sized tech company in downtown Seattle finally called, Emma nearly missed the voicemail. Her phone was buried under a stack of overdue bills. The interview process was daunting. 4 rounds, including a case assignment and a team panel. Emma stayed up late researching project management strategies, reviewing Excel formulas online, and practicing answers in front of the bathroom mirror. On the morning of her final interview, she wore her only professional blazer, collar pressed, hair tucked behind her ears, and carried into the conference room her entire story, not of defeat, but of perseverance. To her astonishment, she landed the job. As a junior project coordinator, the starting salary was modest, but for Emma, it promised more than a paycheck. It was proof that she could stand on her own, that she was moving, slowly, stubbornly, forward. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of learning and self-doubt. The tech world was fast-paced and unfamiliar. At times, she felt like an imposter. But each completed assignment, each successful meeting, chipped away at the layers of insecurity. Her team, a mix of young engineers and seasoned managers, soon came to appreciate her quiet discipline and knack for problem-solving. Emma fell into a new routine. Early to rise, coffee in hand by the bus stop, her mind occupied with project deadlines instead of old anxieties. She carved out moments for herself. fresh flowers from the Saturday market, yoga videos on her laptop, a journal she filled with both grief and gratitude. Through it all, she never lost sight of Lily. Every victory was tempered by longing, but also by a new conviction. One day, her daughter would see her mother not as a victim, but as a survivor. Small milestones became heroic feats: a promotion to team lead after a year, her own savings account, an upgraded apartment with a view of the city skyline. She sent Lily letters she still wasn't allowed to mail, and kept a shelf in her closet lined with unopened birthday presents and books. Though the ache remained, Emma realized that she was not merely enduring. She was building a future worth fighting for. No matter how daunting the odds, Emma was determined. She would not let a web of lies decide her story, nor Lily's. The next time she faced her former husband, her mother-in-law, and the justice system that had failed her, she would do so from a place of strength and with unyielding hope. And somewhere, just under the scar tissue, her heart began beating with resolve again. Success and lingering pain. Emma Carter's professional success unfolded gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, like spring's thaw on the outskirts of Seattle. Her new life, rooted in necessity, was built on small, tenacious victories. Mastering new software, staying late to troubleshoot projects, and quietly earning the respect of her colleagues. The office, once an intimidating world thick with jargon she barely understood, became familiar ground. Cubicles closed in at dawn and opened again at dusk, forming a steady rhythm: work, home, work again, underpinned by the relentless Seattle drizzle tap-tapping on bus windows. Her modest apartment, perched high above the city's busier streets, took on evidence of her upward climb. She replaced the thrift store sofa with a plush navy blue sectional. She hung string lights along the bay window, a private constellation to keep the loneliness at bay during those slow, rain-swept evenings. Every payday, she allowed herself a little celebration: a dinner at her favorite Thai place, or a new book to add to the growing stack by her bed. Little by little, she created a home reflective of the woman she was becoming: independent, resilient, resourceful. Sometimes, she even caught herself humming as she arranged fresh flowers on the kitchen windowsill, surprised by the sound of her own contentment. Yet, the pain of separation from Lily cast a long, persistent shadow. No promotion, no accomplishment could fill the space her daughter's laughter once held. The court-ordered custody arrangement remained unchanged, and any contact Emma had with Lily was grudgingly facilitated by tightly controlled meetings, short, supervised, and lacking warmth. On her best days, Emma forced herself to accept that these half-hour visits were better than nothing. On her worst, she cradled her phone, willing a call or a message that never came. Scrolls through Lily's public social media posts, the only lifeline she dared risk, became a double-edged ritual. She would awaken early, her heart pounding, and scan for any fresh photos. Portraits of Lily at class recitals, cartwheeling through autumn leaves, blowing out birthday candles surrounded by David's side of the family. Lily was growing taller, her hair grown out, her smile guarded in ways Emma recognized only too well. Sometimes, filed among the energetic images, were hints of sadness: a missed glance at the camera, slumped shoulders, a ghost of uncertainty in Lily's eyes. Emma's mother's intuition picked up even the softest signals of her little girl's discomfort. But Emma's pain was largely invisible to everyone but her closest friends. At work, she became known for her diligence and poise under pressure. Promotions followed, first to project lead, then to assistant manager. She spearheaded successful launches, navigated tense client meetings, and quietly mentored younger colleagues who lingered after hours, seeking advice or a sympathetic ear. Her email signature, once tentative, appended in lowercase, shifted to bold, capital letters. She was proud, not just of her accomplishments, but of having rebuilt herself from the fragments David's lies had left behind. However, this new Emma carried her scars with her. Sleep rarely came easy. She would lie awake replaying legal conversations, old courtroom humiliations, and Lily's tearful goodbyes. The technical silence of her apartment pressed down in the middle of the night, punctuated only by the occasional rumble of a passing city bus or the tap of rain against glass. Despite the bright facade, social invitations from coworkers were politely declined, and even Sarah, the friend who had pulled her from the brink, sometimes found Emma unreachable in stretches of quiet numbness. On weekends, Emma would walk through the city parks where she'd once brought Lily to feed ducks or count helicopters in the sky. At the sight of mothers holding their children's hands, a bittersweet ache settled beneath her ribs, a longing that dulled but never faded entirely. She would often pause at playgrounds and watch from a distance, her presence ghost-like, half in the world of bustling families, half lost in memories. Holiday seasons were the hardest. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and birthdays arrived like bittersweet anniversaries. Emma baked cookies in silence, set an extra plate, wrapped gifts she was not allowed to deliver. She kept every present: books, scarves, a collection of stickers and art supplies, in a special box in her closet, a quiet rebellion against the separation imposed on her. Work, at least, offered a sense of control.
We know you were there, Thomas.
Colleagues praised her problem-solving skills, and her direct supervisor recommended her for a fast-track leadership program. Publicly, Emma was celebrated as a rising star, a model of efficiency and innovation. Her drive was interpreted as ambition, but few understood that beneath her outward confidence was a desperate need to prove, to herself more than anyone, that she was not the fragile, broken figure her ex-husband had painted in court. Occasionally, on the city bus rides home, Emma wrote draft emails to Lily that she never sent. In these digital letters, she told her about her days. "I saw a snowy egret in the park today. I baked those walnut muffins you like. I'm proud of you no matter what anyone says." She saved them in a password-protected folder, hoping that someday Lily would read them and know she was never forgotten, not for a single day. Sarah remained steadfast, a beacon through darker stretches. They continued their Sunday brunch tradition, alternating between Emma's apartment and Sarah's cozy downtown flat. With laughter, stories, and unvarnished honesty, Sarah anchored Emma to a world sturdier than her pain. "You're doing more than surviving," Sarah told her one afternoon, squeezing her hand across the table. "You're living. Lily will know that someday." Emma's victory had come at a price. She was respected at work, financially secure for the first time in years, but personal joy remained muted, present only in glimmers. A bouquet of sunflowers from the market, the smile of a new friend, a memory that made her laugh out loud in spite of herself. What she wanted most, a daily, unguarded presence in her daughter's life, remained just out of reach. Yet Emma refused to relinquish hope. She continued to document Lily's life from afar, saving every photo and news clipping, charting her daughter's growth, and quietly strategizing for the future. In moments of doubt, she reread old court transcripts, adding notations, building the mental scaffolding of her next legal effort. She followed news of custody reform, networked discreetly with family lawyers, and built a silent support system of working mothers, legal advocates, and friends who understood what it meant to fight the system and not just survive, but rise. The city outside her window was unceasingly alive. Lights flickering on, building after building, cars streaming down rain-slick streets, news stories taking root in hidden corners. Emma watched, chin lifted, hands resting on her knees, and reminded herself she was not finished. For all she had lost and all she had accomplished, The most important chapter was yet unwritten. And beneath the ache, unbroken and quietly fierce, Emma's determination kindled into resolve.
You'll find it right here.
The fight for Lily, and for her own restored sense of justice, was only beginning. The beginning of the pursuit of justice. Emma Carter's success in the professional world did not quiet the ache for her daughter or dull the drive for restitution. If anything, the calm found in career stability only sharpened the edges of memories she couldn't shake, the flash of confusion on Lily's face, the clinical detachment of a courtroom where truth had gone unheard. It seemed impossible that so many years had passed with justice left undone. And yet, as her life became more her own again, a steely resolve rooted itself where despair had once taken hold. For a long time, Emma had lived as if the rules were unforgiving and her defeat permanent. But victories, small and large, had changed her relationship with hope. The more she rebuilt, the more she recognized the strength in her persistence, the dignity in simply not giving up.
We know you've been lying
Lily's
to us.
absence was no longer a wound that bled daily, but a scar that spurred Emma to seek remedies beyond survival. She would not just exist for what little she was allowed. She would fight for what was right. It began quietly, even clandestinely, with Emma taking stock of every document she'd saved from the chaos of her exile. She had never thrown anything away, not the court order that had granted David custody, not the emails from his legal team, not the stack of receipts and phone records salvaged from her marriage's ruins. She unlocked the box at the back of her closet and spent late evenings at her kitchen table, reviewing each scrap, each record, with new eyes. Emma quickly realized she would need more than memories and paperwork if she wanted to challenge a system that had failed her once before. She started reaching out, cautiously at first, to people who had witnessed the subtler shades of her story. An old neighbor who'd sometimes heard the arguments muffled through the walls, a former babysitter who recalled how Lily would cry after visiting her grandmother.
Gasp.
Bit by bit, Emma pieced together an unofficial timeline, one built from not only legal annotations, but also human recollections of coercion, manipulation, and bias. Online forums for single mothers and victims of custody injustice became her late-night classroom. She scrolled through posts from women who'd walked her road and, in flashes of courage, sent out private messages. How did you prove your ex lied? How do you keep fighting when the system seems stacked? Some wrote back, sharing advice about documentation, lawyers, and self-care. A few suggested support groups in Seattle, where Emma listened to stories that made her own pain feel both unique and universal. It was at one of these Saturday morning meetings in the community room of a downtown library that Emma first met Camille Ramirez. Camille's posture radiated tough humility, a woman who'd walked away from her own wreckages, but whose eyes still softened for other people's vulnerabilities. Camille was a lawyer now, specializing in family law and, more specifically, in representing women who had been outmaneuvered in the fight for their children. After the meeting, Emma hesitantly described her battle and how David, cloaked in his own legal authority, had manipulated the system. Camille listened without rushing, her pen poised over a legal pad as Emma recounted not only the original accusations, but the years of stifled motherhood that followed. When Emma finished, Camille closed her notebook and said, "You are not the first, and you're not alone, but we need to do this right. Are you ready for the long haul?" The reality of reopening old wounds was sobering. Fear returned at night, prickling beneath Emma's skin. What if David destroyed her again? What if Gloria, ever calculating, unearthed details to use as weapons in a new trial? Still, the alternative, giving up, felt intolerable. For Lily's sake, and for her own healing, Emma answered yes. She and Camille strategized over endless cups of coffee in dimly lit cafes, mapping out what would become a comprehensive legal plan. Camille was methodical. She coached Emma on building a narrative that reached beyond accusations and defenses, teaching her how to compile substantive evidence. Medical files showing Emma's clean bill of health during the period of supposed infidelity, financial records highlighting suspicious transactions on David's accounts, discrepancies in dates and details from Gloria's statements. Camille taught Emma to read between the lines and see the patterns of abuse not always visible in a courtroom. Emma was forced to revisit old traumas, to describe, in excruciating detail, how her character had been assassinated in court, the way David's family had isolated her and constructed a self-serving portrait of the unfit mother. She wrote sworn affidavits and included painstaking recollections she'd sometimes wished to forget. Through the process, Emma felt both exposed and empowered. Camille's experience as a former victim herself forged a unique bond between the two women. Late-night texts swapped between them alternated between legal strategy and emotional reassurance. Remember, their power lies in your silence. Each truth you tell chips away at their walls. Sometimes, Camille would remind Emma that even victories in court did not guarantee immediate change, but that the pursuit of justice was itself restorative. As Emma's case file grew in size and strength, so too did her network of support. Sarah, steadfast as always, rallied alongside her, researching public records, helping Emma organize folders, and reminding her, on harder days, that the pursuit of justice was worthy no matter the obstacles. Other mothers, inspired by Emma's courage to challenge an established order, offered their own testimonials or agreed to serve as character witnesses. Emma, once so alone, now felt buoyed by this patchwork of women. Some strangers, some friends, who believed that the truth, once methodically assembled, could be made to matter. Even as her professional life demanded attention, project launches, performance reviews, and after-hours networking, Emma reserved part of herself for the case. She became adept at compartmentalizing, bright and focused at the office, then fierce and analytical at home, prepping her statements and reviewing timelines. The double life was exhausting, but it carried a sense of purpose that had been missing for too long. All the while, the possibility of seeing Lily without restriction became Emma's private North Star. She imagined small, precious details, waking next to her daughter on a sleepy weekend morning, packing lunches together in a sunlit kitchen, hearing Lily's voice rise and fall in casual conversation without witnesses. Each vision reinforced her determination. By early autumn, Emma and Camille were ready to file their first formal motion for custody review. The paperwork was a thick portfolio, part legal argument, part biography, part demand for the world to see Emma not as she had been branded, but as she truly was. As she signed each page, hands trembling with anticipation and fear, Emma realized that hope, even when forced into hibernation, could return stronger than ever. The next phase, a confrontation in court with David, Gloria, and their built-in machinery of power, was looming. But Emma finally understood that justice was not only about the outcome. It was about declaring, with her whole self, that the narrative forced on her was a lie, that she would claim her right to be a mother again. And for the first time in years, as she gathered her copies and notes into a battered folder, Emma felt the closest she ever had to being whole. Confronting the law, Emma Carter stepped into the courthouse on a morning tinged with autumn chill, her heart pounding against her ribs, as though she'd run all the way from her apartment to the imposing stone steps. After years spent on the outside, wounded, exiled, rebuilding, she was finally returning, not as a supplicant, but as a claimant. The corridors smelled of polish and papers, echoes of hushed conversations reverberating off marble floors. Everything felt heavy with memory, yet electrified with new purpose. Outside, David's family had already begun their campaign, setting the tone before Emma even entered the courtroom. Gloria, impeccably dressed and wearing an expression of stone, made a point of standing before a clutch of reporters, misrepresenting the day's hearing as the final blow in a fight Emma didn't know when to surrender. Their attorney spun words for the press, implying that Emma's efforts were a last, desperate bid for attention, a disruption to Lily's stability. By noon, a few tabloid headlines had already painted Emma as a bitter intruder and unfit mother, reinforcing the narrative David's family had spent years engineering. Inside, the mood was no less fraught. Emma's attorney, Camille Ramirez, every bit the composed counselor Emma needed, watched the opposing legal team set up with meticulous, even theatrical, precision. Their files bulged with years of documented grievances, most of them distorted, some outright fabricated, and intermingled with the cold, bureaucratic indifference that had once crushed Emma's voice. But Camille had taught her to anticipate this, rehearsing every possible line of questioning, every possible ambush. Emma's own file had grown with evidence and affidavits, painstakingly assembled details that told a different story than the one David's team had crafted. Still, as the judge entered the room and called the session to order, Emma felt the old tremor of fear. What if her truth, once more, went unheard? The hearing began as so many legal proceedings do, quietly, with careful language and ritual introductions. David's lawyer immediately pressed their advantage, painting Emma as reckless, unreliable, a source of ongoing disruption in Lily's life. The words stung, but Emma listened, hands folded, jaw set in silent resolve. Gloria, called to witness, presented herself as the embodiment of concern, a grandmother worried only for her granddaughter's best interest. Her answers were polished, her memory conveniently sharp for Emma's supposed failings, and suspiciously hazy when confronted with questions about David's whereabouts or his silences at home. The public relations team, hired by David's family, released leaks to the local press that afternoon, sensationalizing events, publishing blurry, dated photographs, meant to cast Emma in the worst possible light. But as the proceedings wore on, cracks began to appear in their facade. Camille, unshaken, led with truth and patience. She called to the stand the neighbor who'd once overheard shouting behind closed doors, and this time, the witness described not Emma's voice, but Gloria's, sharp and controlling. The babysitter tearfully recounted Lily's withdrawal and sadness after visits with her paternal grandmother. These were measured declarations, presented with a calm persistence that the other side's dramatics could not shake. Then came the forensic evidence, financial records and dates that didn't quite add up, emails from David that contradicted his sworn testimony, even hospital bills that called into question the timeline of Emma's supposed infidelity. Camille moved steadily, never bombastic, but relentless, exposing every fragile seam in the wall David's family had spent years fortifying. For Emma, every hour was an ordeal. On the stand, she walked the judge through her displacement, the abrupt eviction, the nights spent without her daughter, the supervised visits where she clung to Lily as if prayer alone could keep their bond alive. She didn't dramatize or accuse. Instead, she spoke with quiet conviction, describing her efforts to build a stable life, her willingness to seek help and therapy, her career growth, her ongoing love for Lily. David was called, and for the first time, his composure slipped. Cross-examination brought up text messages, erratic financial transfers, and contradictory witness statements. When David told the judge he'd always placed Lily's needs before his own, Camille's counter-evidence, The timeline of business trips and childcare arrangements suggested otherwise. The courtroom grew tense as more inconsistencies emerged. Outside the courthouse, the tide of public opinion began to shift, if only subtly. Local news outlets, initially content to parrot statements from David's PR team, now reported on new revelations, irregularities in Gloria's custodial decisions, whispers of David's professional misconduct, and the quiet but powerful testimonials of friends, neighbors, and even some former in-laws who finally found the courage to speak. But the real turning point arrived with Lily herself. As a minor, she could not testify openly in the same way the adults did, but a court-appointed child psychologist relayed Lily's wishes and emotional state. For the first time, the judge and the gallery heard that Lily expressed, in her own words, a longing to be with her mother. There was confusion, fear, and anger in her drawings and interviews. But most tellingly, hope too. A hope for something like before, when Mommy sang at night and made breakfast on Sundays. The emotional gravity of Lily's quiet plea hung over the rest of the proceedings. In the hallway, after one particularly harrowing day, Emma spotted Gloria, her armor of perfection softened by fatigue, being approached not by supporters, but by journalists with hard questions about inconsistencies in her statements. For the first time, Emma saw genuine doubt flicker across the older woman's face. The process stretched over days, each moment in court a test of Emma's resolve, each evening spent in Camille's office, strategizing for the next round. Emma kept meticulous notes, rereading witness statements, bracing herself for the morning's barrage, and refusing to be intimidated, no matter how savage the cross-examination became. Emma had never felt more exhausted or more alive than in those weeks. The fight was bigger than her wishes alone. It was about restoring her daughter's faith in justice, about refusing to be defined by the cruelty and ambition of others. With Camille beside her and a growing chorus of supporters on her side, Emma understood now that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in the presence of it. On the final day, as each side gave their closing arguments, Emma's hands trembled, slightly on the table, but her voice, when given a last chance to address the court, was clear. I want my daughter to be safe, to be loved, and to know the truth. I'll never stop working for her future, no matter how difficult it becomes. As the judge adjourned to deliberate, Emma left the courtroom and stepped into the sunlight. With every breath of the crisp city air, she allowed herself a moment of pride. Not for a victory already won, but for the simple, vital act of fighting back when everything once seemed lost. Her confrontation with the law was far from over, but for the first time in years, Emma felt not just hope, but agency and strength, burning bright and steady in her heart, exposing the truth. By the time the trial reached its climax, Emma Carter felt as though her entire life had crystallized inside the four imposing walls of the courthouse. The air was laced with expectation, heavier even than the autumn rain outside. And every glance from the gallery, every creak of a wooden bench, seemed to drive the stakes higher. Yet after weeks of relentless cross-examination, gut-wrenching revisitations of her past, and night after night spent poring over documents with Camille, Emma sensed a shift. This was no longer just about defense. It was about revelation. The morning began with Camille Ramirez arriving earlier than usual, arms loaded with binders, her face set with quiet determination. Today's the day they answer for their lies, Camille whispered to Emma, her crisp confidence settling Emma's nerves. Together they reviewed the order of witnesses and the new evidence at their disposal. Subtle, damning inconsistencies they'd spent months unearthing. Bank transfers, phone logs, childcare receipts, and the timelines they contradicted. Outside the courtroom, David's family clung to their old narrative. Gloria appeared as composed as ever, but the veneer of certainty was thinning. Even the family's attorney seemed more cautious than boastful. The press, once quick to paint Emma in villainous colors, now hovered, poised to capture the first sign of drama or defeat. All the while, Emma sat straight-backed at the plaintiff's table, fingers steepled beneath her chin, determined not to flinch. The tide began to turn with the neighbor's testimony. Called to the stand, Mrs. Ortega, once only a passing acquaintance, became a linchpin in Emma's case. She described with precision the late-night arguments she overheard, the way Gloria's voice rose sharply through the walls, and how she'd once found Lily, pale and anxious, in the hallway after a particularly volatile evening. When David's attorney tried to undercut her account, citing old, unrelated neighborly disputes, Mrs. Ortega met every question with measured clarity. "I heard what I heard," she said, her eyes trained on the jury. "And what I heard was not a mother destroying her family, but a family tearing a mother apart." But the greatest shock came when Mary, David's own younger sister, took the stand. For years, she'd remained silent, cowed by family loyalty and fear of reprisal. Now, her hands shook as she spoke, but her eyes remained fixed on her brother and mother in the gallery. Eyes filled not with accusation, but honesty. Choking back tears, she spoke of witnessing David and Gloria manipulating Emma, choreographing instances designed to cast Emma as unstable. She hesitated, then continued. "I stayed quiet because I was scared, but I saw how they twisted things. Emma didn't leave Lily. She was driven out, bit by bit." The courtroom sat in stunned silence. As Camille pressed gently for details, Mary described doctored photos, text messages taken out of context, whispered instructions to keep Lily from answering her mother's calls. Across the aisle, Gloria blanched, her composure finally shaken. It was at this point that Camille introduced the meticulously cross-referenced records. Emails in which David and his legal team discussed options for presenting Emma's mental health, financial statements revealing payments to a private investigator, and conflicting affidavits, one signed by Gloria and another by a paid family friend. Each contradiction was laid bare, one after the next, building a picture not merely of misunderstanding, but of systematic deception. As the evidence mounted, the prosecution's confidence began to erode. David, once calm and calculating, grew defensive under cross-examination. "You claim you acted only in Lily's best interest," Camille pressed. "Yet here, on this date, why did you instruct your attorney to block every call from Emma for over 3 weeks?" David stammered, searching for explanation. But the emails projected on the courtroom screen told their own, irrefutable story. Then came the expert witness, a forensic psychologist appointed by the court. She'd spent hours with Lily, carefully documenting the child's emotional struggle. In soft but unwavering tones, she explained that Lily's recent drawings featured recurring themes: locked doors, suitcases by windows, figures reaching for one another across chasms. "The child is experiencing confusion, grief, and longing for reconnection with her mother," she stated flatly. "There is evidence, based on my clinical observation, of emotional manipulation aimed at undermining that bond." Suddenly, the entire case seemed to pivot on the question of intention, not just what had happened to Emma, but why. The jury leaned forward. The judge scribbled notes with more urgency. Even the reporters set their pens racing across notepads. The courtroom energy transformed from rote procedure to something alive, electric with possibility. Camille's closing argument was not theatrical, but deeply methodical, threading together the disparate pieces: the affidavits, the testimony from witnesses within and outside David's circle, the expert analysis, the digital paper trail of calculated cruelty. She spoke not just of Emma herself, but of every woman who'd ever been erased by a louder, more connected opponent. My client was painted as unstable, as unfit, when in reality she was methodically isolated and maligned. The aim was not justice, but control and retribution. A campaign that not only robbed a mother of her child, but a child of her mother's everyday care and comfort. As Emma listened, hands trembling in her lap, she felt the tide not just shift, but surge. She remembered every sleepless night, every letter to Lily never sent, every day spent building a life from thin air, waiting for a chance, not only to clear her name, but to reclaim her humanity. When the defense rose for their final rebuttal, their strategy was noticeably changed. There was no more bluster, only an attempt to muddy the motives behind the new testimonies. But the evidence was no longer unraveling. If anything, it was tightening, drawing the court's attention again and again to the irrefutable facts. For the first time, Emma saw uncertainty on the faces across the aisle. Gloria's hands shook as she fumbled with her pearls. David refused to meet anyone's eyes. The media, once so eager to amplify their narrative, now pounced on their every contradiction. As the court adjourned for the day, Emma sat in stunned, exhausted relief. She looked to Camille, who squeezed her hand in silent triumph, and then toward the doors, where Sarah and a cluster of supporters waited with open arms. The battle was not over, but something fundamental had shifted. The truth, suppressed and suffocated for years, now shimmered in the fluorescent light of the courtroom, a force that could no longer be ignored or spun as mere rumor. Emma's reclaiming of her story was incomplete, justice unfulfilled. But as jurors filed out and officials shuffled the evidence away, Emma found herself, for perhaps the first time since her exile, able to draw a full, steady breath. She would not rest,
Sarah.
Not yet. But she had survived,
Sarah.
and the facts had finally spoken for her. That, she realized, as she stepped outside into the rain-cleared evening, was the beginning of freedom. Judgment Day. The courthouse had never seemed so still. On the morning of the verdict, Emma Carter arrived before the doors even opened, wrapped in a dark blue coat and silence. Seattle's autumn mist rolled over the marble steps, softening the sounds of journalists setting up and security guards chatting on break. Today, both the city and Emma seemed to hold their breath, waiting for a resolution that had been years in the making. Emma sat alone in a quiet alcove outside the main courtroom, her hands folded over a mug of black coffee gone cold. She watched other litigants pace, lawyers arguing quietly on cell phones, the steady flow of clerks with their armfuls of files. But she barely heard them. Her thoughts swirled around Lily's face, her daughter's gentle laugh, the small hand she hadn't held freely in so long. She braced herself for both justice and disappointment.
It's over.
The heart, she had learned, doesn't dare hope without preparing for pain. Sarah arrived, a reassuring burst of energy amid the tension. "You've done everything right, Emma," she whispered, squeezing Emma's shoulder. Camille appeared minutes later, expression composed, her briefcase packed with notes and contingency plans. Together, the three women entered the courtroom. David's family was already assembled. Gloria, resplendent in a pearl gray suit, sat ramrod straight, her face a careful mask. David, edges fraying, avoided everyone's gaze. Reporters lined the back row, pens poised. Whispers rippled as the judge entered, her robes dark against the polished wood, eyes somber and alert. The air thickened with expectation as the judge began to summarize the proceedings, reviewing not just the evidence, but the very essence of the story. A family driven apart, a mother's character flayed and rebuilt, a child caught between competing truths.
What did I miss?
Emma's heart pounded in her ears. For a moment, she glanced at Lily, who was accompanied by the court-appointed psychologist in the front row. Lily caught her mother's gaze and managed a small, fragile smile. It was more hope than Emma had allowed herself in months. The court first addressed the accusations that had torn Emma's family apart. The judge methodically detailed the fabrications and manipulations orchestrated by David, supported by Gloria. The court notes with considerable concern the pattern of coordinated actions meant to disempower the petitioner and alienate the child from her mother, the judge said, her tone severe. Such actions constitute not only an abuse of the court process, but a grievous harm to the minor child's well-being. There was a collective hush. For the first time since the ordeal began, the enormity of what had been perpetrated against Emma and against Lily was spoken aloud, not whispered behind closed doors. Even Gloria's mask faltered. Her hands trembled slightly against her bag as the judge continued. The court then shifted to the matter of custody. The best interest of the child is paramount, the judge intoned. She outlined Lily's emotional distress, confirmed by expert testimony, and the importance of repairing the damaged bond between mother and daughter. Custody is hereby modified, she declared, voice clear over the rustling papers. With immediate effect. Emma could barely comprehend the next words, but then Camille squeezed her hand, and Sarah gasped in relief. Full primary custody was restored to Emma, with visitation for David now under strict supervision, pending further evaluation. Tears blurred Emma's vision as the judge continued. David's legal machinations, once so effective, now backfired. The court ordered a formal investigation into potential perjury, obstruction, and the use of falsified evidence. An audible gasp came from the press as the judge referred the case to the district attorney. Gloria paled. David slumped in his chair. The arrogance leached from his posture. But Emma's relief was far from vindictive. Her mind had fixated on one thing: Lily. When the judge called for a brief recess, the psychologist gently signaled Lily forward. There, in the hush of the courtroom's aftermath, mother and daughter embraced, awkwardly at first, as though fearing it might be taken away, then desperately, fiercely, with the kind of love that can never be fully described. Lily sobbed into Emma's shoulder, whispering, "I missed you, Mom." Emma clung to her, silent tears mapping the journey from devastation to redemption. Outside the gallery, reporters pressed for statements. Camille managed the press, issuing a measured, powerful response about justice, truth, and the resilience of mothers. For Emma, the noise faded into the background. She kept one arm wrapped gently around Lily's shoulders as they left the courthouse, past the fuming glare of Gloria and the vacant stare of David. The aftermath was swift and public. News outlets ran stories not of scandal, but of vindication, a narrative reversal rooted in documents, testimony, and confession. Legal experts debated the implications for other custody practices. Advocacy groups reached out to Emma, asking her to speak about her journey and lend her voice to broader reform. But for now, she focused on the simple acts of rebuilding trust with her daughter. Slow walks in the park, home-cooked meals, laughter echoing in their newly bright apartment. David faced mounting legal trouble as the district attorney's office publicly confirmed an open investigation. Gloria, no longer able to script the public opinion, retreated from view. Her legacy now defined not by control, but by loss and exposure. The family that had once stood united against Emma now splintered, the portrait of stability they so painstakingly maintained shattering under the weight of truth. For Emma, the return to ordinary life felt extraordinary. Each morning was a victory, each conversation with Lily a treasure. The wounds from years of isolation didn't heal overnight. Nightmares lingered, and awkward silences sometimes filled their home.
Really quite something.
Lily moved cautiously, processing her own confusion and pain, but each day brought a little more light. Sarah remained a near daily presence, helping Emma navigate school meetings, counseling appointments, and the logistics of restoring a life. Camille stood by as a friend as well as attorney, guiding Emma through interviews, paperwork, and counseling resources for both mother and child. But the journey was now one of healing, not of mere survival, and in that subtle shift, Emma discovered a gentle faith in the future. As one chapter ended, another began, not with fanfare, but with the shared ritual of hope, a hand held tightly, a lullaby at bedtime, the soft glow of lamplight framing two faces, mother and daughter, together again at last. The rebirth of motherhood. For weeks after the verdict, the world for Emma and Lily felt quietly unfamiliar, as though they were two travelers mapping a landscape both remembered and brand new. Their apartment echoed with the tentative sounds of reconnection, the creak of new footsteps, laughter that started uncertain but always seemed to grow, ordinary questions exchanged at the kitchen table after too many years of scripted meetings under fluorescent lights. At first, the rhythms of shared life came haltingly. Lily packed her school bag in silence, studying her mother with a cautious hopefulness. Emma, once skilled at reading her daughter's every mood, found herself watching and waiting as if approaching a skittish bird. There were stumbles, small miscommunications about bedtimes or favorite foods, moments when Lily recoiled from hugs or clung unexpectedly, her tears surfacing without warning. In the quiet dusk of their first week together, Emma lay awake listening to her daughter's soft breathing in the next room, willing herself to be patient and gentle, promising not to rush the fragile process of healing. Despite the awkwardness, tiny rituals began knitting their days together. Emma would leave cheerful notes tucked beside Lily's breakfast, a smiley face, a joke, a memory of a park they used to visit. Lily, shy at first, responded with crayon drawings left on the fridge or giggles over morning yogurt, their silent exchanges growing more confident with time. Trust, Emma discovered, had to be rebuilt moment by moment. After years of being an occasional visitor in Lily's life, she found herself learning everything anew. Favorite shows, the cadence of preteen complaints about homework, the secret griefs only a child could carry. Counseling sessions, gently recommended by the court, became a cornerstone of their healing. There, with a kind therapist and a box of tissues between them, Emma and Lily stumbled together through honest, sometimes painful conversations. Lily's questions came in rainstorms, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading. "Why did you leave? Did you forget about me? Will you leave again?" Each one broke Emma's heart anew, but she answered with unwavering honesty and reassurance. "I never stopped loving you. I fought for you every single day." Their world slowly expanded. Walks in the park became frequent, sometimes filled with chatter, sometimes just side-by-side silence, picking wildflowers or tossing crumbs to pigeons. In the kitchen, Emma let Lily help measure flour and sugar, risking clouds of white dust and peals of laughter for the comfort of shared creation. Nights closed with Emma reading aloud, sometimes stumbling over chapters as Lily fell asleep mid-story, her head pillowed in the crook of her mother's arm. Sarah, ever a gentle presence in their lives, guided Emma with practical wisdom and friendship. "Let her see you struggle. She needs to know that you're human, not perfect," Sarah said, pouring tea while Lily painted quietly nearby. These reminders helped Emma let go of the impossible expectations she'd carried, the belief that healing meant erasing all traces of loss, rather than accepting that scars could be woven into the beauty of a new beginning. Emma's own journey towards forgiveness became as central as the process of rebuilding with Lily. Guilt at not having protected her daughter sooner haunted her in the stillness before dawn. Through therapy, she confronted the hard truths: her blindness to manipulations, her years of isolation, her fear of challenging unjust systems. Yet with each shared day, her guilt loosened its grip, replaced by gratitude. For another hug goodnight, a note in the lunchbox, a shelter safe from gaslighting and lies. As fall painted Seattle in gold and crimson, Emma found herself welcomed into new circles. Lily's teachers, advocates, and neighbors, once strangers or mere formalities, became a network of support. At PTA meetings and community events, Emma was at first guarded, but gradually her story began to ripple outward. Other mothers, some noticing the headlines, approached her. "Was it as hard as they say? How did you keep going?" Emma answered candidly, never sensationalizing, always grounded in the hope that her survival might offer comfort or inspiration. The wider world noticed, too. Media outlets, once so quick to repeat rumors, now invited Emma to share her experience. She was hesitant at first. Exposure still felt dangerous. But with Camille's help, she learned to tell her story on her own terms. Interviews, podcasts, and panels followed, each engagement carefully chosen. Emma's voice, calm and clear, spoke not only of her own ordeal, but of larger issues: the power imbalances in family courts, the vulnerability of mothers isolated by wealth and privilege, and the quiet endurance required to reclaim lost dignity. Moved by the stories she heard from other women, single mothers threatened with legal erasure, survivors of coercion with nowhere to turn, Emma resolved to create real change. Out of her own savings, supplemented by donations and with organizational help from Sarah and Camille, she founded a support foundation for mothers in crisis. The program offered emergency legal aid, trauma counseling, and practical help. Playgrounds for supervised visits, community meals, a hotline run by empathetic volunteers who'd walked through fire like Emma herself. Emma poured her newfound energy into this mission. She met with state lawmakers, advocated for custody reform, and collaborated with social workers to draft proposals for more humane visitation policies. Each time she stepped onto a forum or met with a struggling parent, she remembered the blur of her own exile, how even a single voice of kindness or a moment of agency could become a beacon in the dark. The work was exhausting, sometimes heartbreaking, but also a source of resilience, proof that pain, transformed by compassion and effort, could yield real good. All the while, Emma prioritized nurturing the small world she and Lily shared. School projects were proudly displayed on the refrigerator.
Hope you're okay.
Monthly adventure days marked the calendar. Beach trips, science museums, quiet afternoons in local bookstores. Emma adopted the habit of making memory books, filling blank pages with photos, mementos, and notes to Lily,
Can't talk about
both
it
a
now, Mom.
keepsake and a
Let it
record of
go.
all the ways they chose one another,
You need to move
day
on,
by
honey.
day. The past did not disappear. There were setbacks, moments of anxiety for Lily, nightmares that left Emma awake and vigilant, occasional legal letters from David's side as they navigated the aftermath. But whatever difficulties arose, Emma faced them openly with her daughter, modeling a new way of living, one in which fear was acknowledged but not allowed to rule, and healing was a journey, not an event. Through it all, mother and daughter discovered the strength that comes from surviving together. Emma no longer saw herself as merely a victim or a survivor, but as a whole woman, capable of love, joy, and a hope undiminished by years of loss. For Lily, security no longer seemed impossible. She learned to dream again, to lean on her mother's consistency and the newfound community surrounding them. The rebirth of motherhood was not a return to what was lost, but an arrival into something fiercer and more tender. A family forged not in spite of suffering, but precisely because both had learned the true meaning of holding on. Happiness reborn. A gentle sunrise poured through the living room windows, tinting the world gold. The city beyond, once so gray to Emma, now seemed radiant and alive. It had been nearly a year since Lily returned home for good. With each passing season, the pain and uncertainty that once colored every waking moment faded a little more, replaced by a vibrant mosaic of laughter, growth, and hard-won peace. Their apartment, high above the restless rhythm of downtown, now radiated comfort and warmth. Emma had filled every corner with evidence of renewed life, framed photos of Lily grinning up from muddy creek beds, watercolors on the fridge, books stacked on every available surface. The air often swirled with the smells of cinnamon rolls or garlic bread, a sign that the kitchen had become their shared creative playground. On weekend mornings, mother and daughter would curl up together on the navy blue sectional, sipping tea and reading aloud, the simple intimacy a balm against everything they had weathered. Once tentative and wary, Lily thrived in the climate of stability her mother cultivated. She sang in the school choir and joined the robotics club, her confidence blooming in rooms once haunted by caution. She brought friends home, eager to share her mother's goofy jokes and the fairy lights strung across her bedroom window. Sometimes, in quiet moments, Lily would rest her head on Emma's shoulder, her contented hush speaking volumes about trust returned. For Emma, this daily happiness was never taken for granted. She cherished the mundane, the shared breakfasts, the ritual of packing lunchboxes, the notes traded in coat pockets. Healing had not been linear, and shadows sometimes fluttered at the edges. Lily would occasionally wake from nightmares, calling for her mother, and Emma would hold her gently, whispering reassurances until dawn softened the darkness. But now, those moments became chances to choose each other all over again, to build rituals of comfort where old wounds had once ached. Outside their home, echoes of their struggle reverberated across the city. David, facing both legal and professional disgrace, was no longer a shadow over Emma's daily life. The court's findings spurred investigations, both into his role in manufacturing evidence and in mishandling funds at his firm. Public trust eroded. Colleagues quietly distanced themselves, and former friends no longer answered his calls. What had begun as a campaign to break Emma's spirit ultimately unraveled his own carefully composed world. By spring, David had lost his prestigious position and faced charges that would keep him entangled in courtrooms for years to come. Gloria, too, receded, her social circle shrinking with each new headline. The persona she had so meticulously built, patrician, moral, formidable, was stripped away in the glare of public accountability. Where once she'd sought to control every outcome, now she was left with only regret and a fractured family legacy. Emma, meanwhile, found herself steadily ascending into a new phase of life, one defined not by the battles she'd fought, but by the futures she sought to build. Her work with the Support Foundation blossomed. Mothers and children from across the city and beyond turned to her for counsel, community, and hope. Her story made its way into articles and national broadcasts, but Emma's focus remained grounded in the everyday. Sitting side by side with a young mother at a shelter, crafting policy ideas with local representatives, reassuring a frightened child that tomorrow could be better. Lily sometimes accompanied her to public events, watching with pride and a little awe, as her mother spoke at rallies or stood before lawmakers demanding change. In those moments, Emma felt the gravity of everything she'd endured, but also the freedom to define herself on her own terms. For every speech or interview, she made sure to be home for homemade pizza night, or to braid Lily's hair before a field trip, determined to anchor her legacy in what mattered most.
I know, right?
Their community, once silent or uncertain, now surrounded Emma and Lily with support and love. Neighbors waved when they passed on the sidewalk. Teachers noted the gentle influence Lily carried among her peers. Families at the playground recognized Emma and would stop to share a word of thanks or encouragement. New friendships sprung up, people drawn both by Emma's quiet resilience and by the sincere joy that now animated her. Sunday brunches with Sarah and Camille became cherished rituals, where victories were toasted and setbacks soothed with laughter and honest conversation. On the anniversary of the verdict, Emma hosted a small gathering in their apartment. The living room buzzed with friends, supporters, and laughter. Camille raised a glass to the power of patience and truth. Sarah, ever the spark of celebration, brought a cake inscribed with the words, "Hope lives here." Lily, now a year older and infinitely wiser, stood on a chair and read a poem she wrote about courage, about letting go of fear, and of the small, bright moments that grew from everyday kindness. After everyone left and the city lights sparkled below, Emma and Lily stood together at the window. A rare hush settled between them. "Are you happy, Mom?" Lily asked softly, her voice shy but clear. Emma, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face, searched her heart, not for the absence of pain, but for something richer, more real. "I am," she whispered, "happier than I thought I could ever be, because we're together and we're free to be ourselves. That's all I ever needed." The road to this happiness hadn't been straight or easy. There would still be difficult days, and memories would sometimes knock at the door. But Emma no longer measured life in losses. Each moment with Lily was a testament, not just to survival, but to transformation. Every sunrise marked gratitude. Every shared laugh or comfort after a bad dream was proof that love, once shattered, could be patiently rebuilt stronger than before. Mother and daughter's story, once marked by sorrow and separation, now gleamed as an emblem of endurance and hope. Emma's advocacy work would ripple outward, changing lives she might never witness. Lily's trust and confidence would ripple too, as she carried kindness into her friendships and, ultimately, into her own adulthood. As the seasons cycled onward, their happiness endured. Not perfect, but beautifully, tenderly real. Emma understood now. Happiness wasn't an endpoint, but a daily practice, a shared promise. In the tapestry of their new life, each imperfect thread shimmered, evidence that even from ruins, a family could be born again.